What's up guys, today I'm back and I've got the Mesa Boogie 35 watt Mark V amp. Now this is the middle brother in the Mark V family. There's a 25 watt version, the 35 watt, and then the full 90 watt version. Now depending on how long you've been following my channel, you may or may not know that I used to have a 90 watt version for about a year and a half. And it was a good amplifier, but it was very much a overwhelming amount of choice that I didn't jive with. And I was always tweaking the amp, just touching little things here and there, trying to get just this, what seemed like an ever so elusive sound. And I think that they've simplified things enough with this amp that it sort of bridges the gap between sort of what we saw with the Badlander and what I saw with my full-size Mark V. And although you can still kind of sort of get hung up with the tweaking options, it's very much a double-edged sword. You can get some great sounds out of this, but you can also struggle to really find a specific sound if that's what you're after. So rather than go through all the different sounds this thing can achieve, I'm gonna kind of just show off a couple of the sounds that I've really enjoyed using, and the sounds that I've used on stage with our band that have worked out just absolutely exceptionally well. So before I get going any further, again, big shout out to the guys at Zzounds for sending me this Boogie to try out and take it on stage, play with the guys, and then to bring it back here and give you some honest thoughts and opinions on what I think about this amp. Today the signal path is going to be the Strandberg. It's been a while since I've given this thing some love on the channel, so we're going to be using the Strandberg into the Golden Boy, into the amp, into the Splawn cabinet. There's nothing in the effects loop, and I'm going to be playing with a new reverb plugin. Well, depending on how it sounds, you might just get a bone dry sound for the video, which, you know, maybe you're into that, but we'll see what happens. But anyways, I'm recording it dry, so the option is there for either of those options after the fact. So we're gonna get going here. The jam-ish thing you heard in the beginning was just sort of a quick playthrough using I guess the channel 1 in the crunch mode, which I really think is outstanding sounding. And then the channel 2 setting was in the Xtreme Mode, which, despite the name, is somewhat the least extreme in terms of just the sheer like saturation and gain output, but it has a much more open and less compressed and just a bigger sound that I think just sounds so great. And it's a sound that I never got out of the full-size Mark V, so I'm somewhat convinced that they've revoiced this thing for the better compared to the amplifier that I used to own. So definitely have been liking this a whole lot more than the one I used to have. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get started here. I'm gonna flip this channel 1 switch over to the fat mode, so it's a little bit less gainy. Bump the volume up a little bit here. It does lose a little bit of volume going from the crunch to the fat mode. Bump the gain up a little bit here. I don't want it to get too crunchy. I like for this to stay that real thick fat sound without really any gain on it. It's just right there on the edge right there. Yeah, right there after you go a little past 9 o'clock, that's when it starts getting a little bit of hair on it. That right there. It's clean, but just clean right there on the edge. Okay. Switch over to the actual clean setting. Immediately you can hear how it lost a lot of that meat on the low end. All right, back to the crunch setting. Back the volume back down a little bit. That is hands down one of the best crunch sounds that I've heard out of any amplifier. I mean, period. It's got just the right amount of smoothness, just the right amount of saturation, just the amount of low-end compression, but still an open sound and a good bite in the top end. I know there's kind of a lot of adjectives in there to kind of describe what I'm hearing, but that's basically the crunch sound that my brain gravitates towards extremely heavily. It's very reminiscent of the crunch sound that I was getting out of the Kraken, actually. Maybe with a little bit more low-end oomph on this thing. I think the Kraken was a little bit tighter. This one's a little bit looser. But for a good crunch sound, I prefer a little bit more of a less tight low end for that crunch, so you can get like those real meaty, I don't know how to describe it. You probably know what I'm talking about. All right, I'm gonna try backing the gain down a little bit. This channel really doesn't, or this mode really doesn't get too clean. It kind of starts off crunchy and only goes up from there. Now, here's where I really like to spice things up with the Golden Boy. And typically the Mark amps that I've tried out, the Mark IV, the 2C, the Studio Preamp, the 2C circuit, and my Mark V, none of those really liked boost pedals whatsoever. But the Golden Boy really does seem to, it can play along fairly nicely as long as you don't have too much gain coming from the amp itself. So this is the boost mode, and it's the light blue transparent mode. Off. that low end and that lower mid range really makes you like it makes digging into those notes really aggressively. It makes that it feels so good to do that. So okay, boost is off. I'm going to go to the drive mode, and I have it on the yellow or the orange mode, which is sort of like a maybe a Marshall type mode. So here's that. Again, this is off. And the boost on top of that, so you're stacking both of them. All right, now I'm going to raise the gain up on the crunch mode, and we're going to see what it sounds like. Spoiler, it sounds good. All right, that was awesome. Let's check out the channel 2 modes, and we're going to start off, actually we're going to start off on the Xtreme Mode, which is where I prefer to have it, and the gain knob is pretty low, but that's just because this amp just has a ton of gain. Lots of saturation, lots of really good saturation. right, now we're checking out Mark II C+ mode. So as you can hear, even with the gain at like halfway, this just so much saturation, like way more than what I would use on stage. But it's nice if that's what you're after. The amp can certainly dish it up. Let's go ahead and check out Mark IV mode. All right, and finally back to the Xtreme Mode, and we're gonna play around with the gain and see what that sounds like when the gain is really pushed. I like that it's still clean, but it still feels really saturated. It feels really good to play. And with it cranked all, much, much higher, the sound did start to get a little bit sloppy. And part of that is possibly, in my opinion, probably a little bit having to do with the EL84 output section rather than, a full-blown 6L6 or big glass power section. So again, and this thing is ripping loud. Like the master is at noon, which is essentially as loud as the thing will get. But really, that's where it sounds its best, in my opinion. And even though it has a 35, 25, or 10 watt mode, 35 watts feels the best to play because it's still got a lot of punch and clarity. You don't lose a whole lot of output, the volume output. In fact, let me show you what it does here, going from 35 to 10 watts, because it does change maybe from pentode to triode, or I think it changes something with the actual tube structure usage or something. I don't know. That's over my head. That's over my pay grade, guys. All I know is I hit the switch and it sounds different. That's what you know. Okay. So here we go. So you can hear the low end. It's got just a little bit more of a bite to it and a little bit more of a percussive feel to it, which again, in my opinion, for that type of sound, it really does need that. If you're looking for something smoother, like maybe for some less spiky in the low end lead sounds, then maybe you could run it in 10 watt mode. But if you're thinking you're going to get a big volume drop and still get a really nice saturated sound, I mean, it's going to drop the volume a little bit, but as you could hear, it's in the room, it's not really much of a difference at all. It changes more of the feel and the kind of like the structure of the sound more than the actual volume output. So this weekend at the show, I actually was using the Golden Boy on Overdrive 2. I didn't use it a lot because, again, we're squarely in that 90s rock and 2000s hard rock style of music. So I don't need a lot of gain. What you were hearing there was perfectly adequate for just about the whole show. There were a couple of songs that we did kick on. I did kick on a little bit of a boost, just the clean boost, not the actual drive boost. And you know, sounded great. All right, here we go. All right, now just for fun, I'm going to kick on the actual drive boost and leave the boost off. So here we go. This is no boost at all. So as you could hear, it didn't really make nearly as much of a difference on the sound as the actual clean boost setting did, and that sort of circles back around to earlier in the video where I said that most of the Mesas that I've tried, really the Mark voicings, they really don't like drive pedals in front of them once you're using a fairly substantial amount of gain. And again, this amp, it really isn't any exception to that rule I've found. The clean boost really isn't adding a lot of actual like saturation to the sound. It's just sort of hitting it with decibels as far as I know how it works. But that's the only reason why it works. And really it only works best, in my opinion, on the Xtreme Mode. And that's simply because the Xtreme Mode does not have that saturation that the Mark II and the Mark IV mode have. Speaking of the two other modes, I'm not a big fan of the Mark IIc Plus mode on this, if I'm being 100% honest. I mean, I think the Mark IIc is obviously a legendary name in the amp world, but for this particular amp and the type of sounds that I like to get out of amplifiers, the Mark IV mode kind of comes closer to the Mark, but I'm sorry for the pun. It kind of comes closer to what I'm looking for out of a sound if you're more looking at a much higher saturation amount. But when I flipped it down to the Xtreme Mode and I heard that openness and just an overall bigger sound, that's where I really started to fall in line with this amplifier and really started to enjoy my time with it. So yeah, speaking of enjoying my time with it, we played our show this weekend and I used this amp into the aux box, into the ZLX monitor behind me, and to the PA. and the amp sounded amazing on stage. It fit in perfectly for all of the songs that we were playing. And again, the crunch mode, I'll show you how I did it. It's similar to how I play the Jubilee. So yeah, for a lot of the songs that we played, I just kind of had this nice crunchy rock sound. And then if I wanted to spice it up a little bit, I can add just the regular boost. And if I needed to go higher gain, but still stay within that crunch mode voicing, I could just stack the drive mode on top of that. So yeah, it covers a lot of ground, and then taking both of the boosts off and just rolling the volume pedal back a little bit. It's again, it falls into that good enough, clean enough sound for throwing out these types of songs on stage live. The audience doesn't care if it's clean. They just care that you hit the right notes. So. So stuff like that, perfectly passable. And then, you know, just all that just from one channel. And then if I really want to take it up to the next level for the higher gain stuff. So yeah, it's just, that's how I dialed the amp in. And for the music that we played, it really worked out very well. So now some kind of the main thing that I didn't like on stage was, because I'm running the amp essentially it's given as much as it's got at this point. The solo boosts really don't do anything. They're really intended to push the amp kind of to where it is right now, and normally you would operate at a lower decibel output level. But even though, you know, I'm not using an actual cabinet on stage, the fact that I was able to have the sound that I wanted, that was more important to me than the actual decibel boost, because to be honest, I wouldn't have used this anyways. I've got either a TC Spark that I can put in the loop, but again, if you've got this thing kind of dimed out in terms of what it's actually going to be able to produce decibel wise, nothing in the loop is really going to change anything. So I was using the Oxbox, the compressor, which doesn't actually do any compressing, it just adds a decibel output boost to the sound. And because that's all happening after the amp doesn't care. It's just giving me just a pure more output through the PA and through my FR. So that's how I was able to achieve both having the best sound that I feel like the amp produces on stage, along with still having more to give decibel output wise. So that was not a problem that I really encountered with the full wattage version. Obviously it's got significantly more power and more headroom, and it can just punch a lot harder and cleaner on stage. But I think for the size and the relatively small size of this compared to the full size version, I mean, this is not a small amp, but it definitely weighs less than the full size version. I can say that. But yeah, I like having less options over here. I still really like having the options here with the the EQ, whether it's in just like an always on position, or whether you toggle it with the foot switch, or if it's off. I don't particularly like any of the sounds that the amp produces without an EQ, without the EQ engaged. I just feel like this is what makes this amp for me, as well as like the studio preamp that I had and the Mark IV that I got to play for a while as well. So I think that the gain modes, or the drive modes, or whatever you want to call them on here, I think that they're really well done. I think that even though they do offer something different, they're still grounded in the same overall, the same voice. So you're not straying too far from one sonic footprint to the next. I think that the problem with the 2C Plus mode for me is that it's a little bit too narrow of a sound. Like the mid-range kind of like does this, and it's almost like it gets a little bit too compressed and stuffy and one-dimensional in the mid-range. It does tighten up. It's the tightest, highest gain mode out of all three of the settings. But to me, losing that kind of big open sound that the Mark IV mode does a little bit better, and the Xtreme mode does even more so better. I don't like that trade-off, and I think it's mainly down to the type of music that I play and the type of sound that I naturally gravitate towards. So the 2C Plus mode is definitely the weakest part of this amp for me, but again, that's just my personal preference here. Mark IV mode, I think that if I had to nitpick, I wish that it had less gain when you have the, the volume knob or the gain knob, right back here. Like even right here, like it is just full on high gain at that point. And I really wish that there was a little bit more flexibility, because again, it's been a while since I actually got to spend time with the Mark IV, but I don't remember the gain being that intense, like right out of the gates like this one is. So if I could change anything or nitpick about it, that's kind of what I would nitpick on. Speaking to more usable gain down low, that's kind of why I really enjoy the Xtreme mode. It has a lot of gain and saturation, and so that's there if you want it. But I do like the fact that I can still pull it back and still have a nice high gain sound with the option to hit it with a drive or a boost or whatever, and still maintain all that clarity and that openness that the Xtreme mode has, that the other two really don't have that much of. So yeah, that's gonna kind of wrap things up for my thoughts on this amp. And I know this video went a little bit long, but there's two reasons for that. I think that there's a lot of stuff in this amp, and there are a lot more reviews out there that go through so many more sounds that this amp is capable of producing. I think it's got, like, it can cover like what seems like any kind of genre, to be honest. So again, it's a very impressive amp with a lot of different sounds, and I think that the only person who this might not work for is if you are on stage and you are using a cabinet and you've got another guitar player with a high wattage amp, 50 or higher. You might struggle with this amp. The clean headroom or the clarity at the volumes that you're probably going to be playing at, it might not be able to keep up. And if you're playing it like how I use it, where you're solely relying on PA to amplify the sound, all of a sudden it's a much more usable product. And for that situation, I think these lower wattage and these smaller, lunchbox style amps, that's really where these things can shine. And like these, the impulse response loader boxes, like the Waza tube amp expander, the Fryette Power Station, even the aux box, they're giving these amps a power platform to be much more viable as a product, as a usable product on a very loud stage. Whereas in the past, 15, 20, 30 watts was tough to get by with before, if you were at the mercy of unfamiliar sound guy, things could go really badly for you, which I've experienced myself. So anyways, enough of the tangent here. I hope you guys enjoyed what you heard from the amp. I think there's a lot of great sounds in this thing. And if you're interested in checking this thing out, I've got an affiliate link to the Zzounds website where they can hook you guys up. They've got great payment options if you really want to check this thing out. The affiliate links truly do help out the channel. It's not much, but every little bit helps. And if you're not interested in making the purchase, if you aren't subscribed, hitting that subscribe button is a great way to help me. And again, it doesn't cost you anything. So any help like that, greatly appreciated. And if you know someone who might be interested in this amp, maybe haven't made up their mind, and if they play a type of style that I play, if you think this video would be helpful to them, please, by all means, pass it along and share it around. I'd love to help out those who are not familiar with the channel. So yeah, that's going to wrap up this video of the Mark V 35-watt amplifier from Mesa Boogie. And again, as another great Boogie. Really enjoyed my time with it. So yeah, if you're interested, check it out, and stay tuned for the next video. I think it's going to be awesome, and I've got 2 more that I'm also really excited about coming up here soon. So yeah, thanks for checking the video out, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.